Ron Lung Association claims West Point Pepperell has found a way to avoid paying future medical benefits for workers who take the out-of-court settlement. The association says the company attorney... Let's use this for files, maybe, I guess.
5 natural disasters in the past 3 years, including Hurricane Frederick and the Hurtsboro tornado, damaged millions of dollars worth of private property. Property rebuilt with more than $22 million worth of Federal Emergency Management Agency family grants. FEMA even advanced the state more than $6 million worth of its share of the loans. The state hasn't repaid the $6 million debt, which led to a bill of collection from FEMA threatening a 13.2% interest penalty, loss of future FEMA assistance, and jeopardizing other federal aid. Finance Director Rex Rayner says although the state's general fund isn't in any better shape to repay the debt now than it was a year ago, FEMA has agreed to a new repayment schedule in exchange for dropping the penalties.
The difference now is that we have to choose between a 13.22% interest rate, which is considerable on that amount of money because you're backing up every day. And secondly, we never know, this is hurricane season, when some of our people might be endangered from some other disaster, such as a flood or a hurricane or tornado. So to do this then, we're just simply having to delay some payments in other areas. We're trying to make all the payrolls, of course, and deferring payments where we can.
Rayner says repaying this debt is one of the reasons the state has put a freeze on unnecessary expenses and out-of-town travel. Chris Grimshaw, WSFA TV News at the Capitol. All candidates that file with the Secretary of State must file qualification papers, and within 5 days from that, campaign committee papers. A quick check of the unofficial list shows 29 candidates who haven't apparently met that requirement. Or have they?
There are a number of questions arising primarily because of the outdatedness of our elections code. There are confusing and conflicting sections in our 1915 Corrupt Practices Act.
One question involves minor party candidates, any party other than Republican or Democrat. A newly passed law requires them, unlike in past years, to qualify at the same time as the major parties.
It's my understanding that that law has not yet been approved by the Justice Department and therefore probably will not be effective in this 1982 election year.
There are 10 minor party candidates of the original list of 29 who may be cleared by this decision. Of the remaining 19 candidates who apparently haven't met the requirements, 18 are running for the House or Senate.
Well, the code was written at a time when both the State House and State Senate were, in fact, county offices. So in one place it refers to the State House and State Senate as county officials, and in another place it's implied that they are state officials.
And that could make a difference, since if legislative candidates are treated as state officials, they must file with the Secretary of State. But if they are treated as county officials, then they must only file with the county probate judge. Siegelman says he'll have answers to all of these questions by July 29th, which is the deadline to certify all candidates to the probate judges across the state, so those qualified candidates' names will appear on the ballot. Chris Grimshaw, WSFA TV News at the Capitol.
Smith's sister, Ann Perdue, says the family is worried about her brother and how he's been portrayed in the media. She met with Smith today at this abandoned house in the Camel community of Chilton County. She says he told her he didn't mean to kill his former wife and her husband, that he went into a daze after arguing with his ex-wife over visiting his children. His sister says he told her he didn't realize what he had done until Thursday. Miss Perdue says her brother is in bad shape, mentally and physically exhausted.
He said he had no intentions of harming anybody. This morning he's scared, he's frightened, he's afraid he's going to be shot down by the law. They think he's armed. He told me he wasn't.
Mrs. Perdue says during her meeting with her brother, they had made plans for Smith to turn himself into Chilton County Sheriff James Johnson.
Well,
Sheriff Johnson says Smith was apparently scared off by workmen who were in the wooded area.
When she got back down there, some trucks had come through, some people had come through there. He'd seen the trucks and he'd left. And far as I know, that's as close as we've been to him today.
Between 150 and 200 law enforcement officials and civilians searched this afternoon. Helicopters and tracking dogs were also called in, but all they could turn up was a patch of marijuana. A Officials say over 300 plants were recovered, valued at $100,000. The search is expected to continue into the night. So for right now, it appears that Smith would rather take his chances in the woods against Mother Nature and an armed search party, rather than imprisonment and a lengthy court battle. Reporting from Chilton County, Don Phelps, WSFA TV News. Between 150 and 200 people took part in the search for Smith around the Campbell community in rural Chilton County this afternoon. One of those who looked on as law enforcement officials mapped out their strategy was Smith's sister, Ann Perdue. She met with her brother this morning at a deserted house. She says Smith is frightened, tired, and has just recently realized what happened in Selma last week.
Well, he said he didn't come here to kill his wife. He said that he met there when she came to work, and there was an argument, and it happened. He said that he didn't realize actually what he'd even done until Thursday after this Tuesday incident. And so that's when he began to get on the move. The full reality of what had happened had hit him, and
Mrs.
he had to
Smith
get on
said
the
her brother
move.
told her he was not armed with a gun,
like he was
and that he
possessed, I
didn't want to
guess.
hurt
He had to
anyone.
get...
She said a plan she worked out with her brother to turn himself in to Chilton County Sheriff James Johnson failed. Sheriff Johnson and Mrs. Perdue went back to the deserted house this morning, but Smith wasn't there. Sheriff Johnson believes that Smith was scared off by workmen who were in the woods. By the time tracking dogs and helicopters were called into the search, the trail had gone cold. Although Smith eluded authorities, a patch of marijuana hidden. More than 300 plants were recovered by officials. They say it's worth $100,000. Reporting from Chilton County, Don Phelps, WSFA TV News.
This Alabama Brown Lung Association thermometer shows, quote, late justice for brown lung victims. The chart shows from 1973 to 1979, no plant workers who contracted the respiratory ailment were compensated until 2 years ago, when the first of 14 former mill employees received what BLA representatives call inadequate compensation.
Even after they started giving yearly breathing tests back in 1973 with the intention of finding workers who showed symptoms of brown lung and helping them, for some reason they still did not find any deserving of compensation.
Officials say West Point Pepperell did not offer to pay the workers until after the association began advising them of their rights. The members claimed West Point Pepperell has found a way to avoid paying future medical benefits for workers who take the out-of-court settlement. The association says the company attorney files disability claims for the workers and at the same time files another motion to dismiss the claim, which in effect keeps the company from having to pay future medical bills. Plant officials denied the allegations, saying all workers were compensated justly and fairly. In the meantime, BLA officials say they plan to file more suits in an effort to recover more than the $1 million in workers' compensation. Kim Davis, WSFA TV News in Opelika. BLA members hope their thermometers showing, quote, late justice for plant workers will soar and pass the $1 million compensation mark. However, officials say many brown lung victims are reluctant to file suit, fearing West Point Pepperell will fire family members and relatives who work at the mill. BLA members say plant officials recently offered 14 former workers who suffer from bisonosis, better known as brown lung, $119,000 in damages. But BLA officials say that settlement is inadequate because the workers did not have legal counsel and say it wasn't until after the association stepped in to assist the workers that something was done.
The Alabama Brown Lung Association believes that its presence has been the deciding factor in the West Point Pepperell decision to finally start paying compensation to brown lung victims.
Company officials denied the allegation, saying all Alabama workers and employees at their plants in other states were awarded fairly. In the meantime, BLA members say they're determined to continue the battle against West Point Pepperell, a company they say only started paying compensation out of self-interest. Kim Davis, WSFA TV News in Opelika.
because we signed a new treaty. But it cannot with you. Now, thank you. Go. We try to develop, to be a better man, to be a better citizen for our community, to change the idea that the government has to give us everything, that we can solve our problems by our own work or by our own interest to solve our problems. The international...
One of the ways people managed to rebuild their homes after Hurricane Frederick, the Hurtsboro tornado, and any one of 3 floods during the past 3 years was through low-interest loans from the Federal Emergency Management Agency. FEMA granted more than $22 million worth of loans. More than $6 million worth was an advance to the state for its share of the loans, but only $500,000 of that advance has been repaid to date.
We just simply told the federal government that we just could not meet our previous commitment at that time.
What makes it? The state missed a June 11th deadline to repay the full amount and faced a 13.2% interest penalty on the debt, loss of future FEMA aid, and problems with other federal programs. But the governor's office managed to negotiate a new payment schedule with FEMA.
$1 million paid by the middle of this month in July, another $1 million by the end of September 1982, and then the balance by the end of December.
Finance Director Rex Rayner says the new schedule will be tough to meet since state dollars aren't readily available, but he said the options weren't appealing.
We have to choose between a 13.22% interest rate, which is considerable on that amount of money, because you're backing up every day, and secondly, we never know, this is hurricane season, when some of our people might be endangered from some other disaster, such as a flood or a hurricane or tornado.
That's why Rayner says the state will be biting the dust and repaying the loan by cutting down on as many other expenses as possible. Chris Grimshaw, WSFA TV News at the Capitol.
These people are concerned about increases in their property taxes, and they gathered several hundred strong at the Montgomery Civic Center to talk about what to do. Area candidates for the State House and Senate were invited to listen. Some of the candidates even took notes. To help pay for the cost of the rally, buckets were passed to gather donations. The chairman of the Citizens for Fair and Equitable Taxation, Richard Jordan, used charts to show what he said is the current tax situation. He then read a letter outlining the committee's ideas for property tax reform. The proposals include increasing the homestead exemption, exempting senior citizens from all property taxes, tax breaks for small businesses, and specific qualifications for property appraisers. But the committee didn't stop with property taxes.
If this move continues as it is with the same momentum through the governor's race, yeah, we're going to have to look at other areas of government. I'd like to be involved in the budgetary process. I'd like for some of these housewives to see if they couldn't contribute something to draw in the budget with a limited amount of money. I'd like to explore the possibility of getting a recall provision put in the Constitution, where when you elect a man to state government or city or county government, he doesn't do what he promised, you got a method by which you can bring him out of there, recall him.
Dennis Latham, WSFA TV News.
We have got to, as citizens of this state, regain.
This spring, we went out to make somebody earn the #1 quarterback job. Played 5 games, had Bobby Skelton and all SEC officials every week, and kept charts on the quarterbacks and who did what, and made mistakes and so on and so forth, and they struggled. I mean, and it's probably a blessing in disguise, because this spring was as tough on quarterbacks as a spring could possibly be, because our defense kicked the crap out of the offense all spring long. And you know, and we ended up spring practice with a #1 quarterback that won it, earned it, and did it on the field. And that was Randy Campbell. So I feel good. Randy's not the most talented guy we got at that position, but he's the best. And so we'll go into the fall this year with a leader at quarterback, and a #1 quarterback. Now, we will probably play more than one quarterback. I'm not sure who that is. Right now we have Mike Mann, Ken Harvey and Clayton Buford working at quarterback. Pat Washington may have something to say about who's going to play quarterback before it's all over with.
Have around 14,000 chapters around the world. In 90... My French is better. And I talked with many of my friends there a long time ago. And we said, we need the military there, yes or not? Well, maybe Panama needs the military beside there. Our canal is bigger than our country.
One of the hottest topics in Alabama in the past few weeks is the question of property taxes. Higher property taxes scheduled to go into effect this fall. Dennis Latham of our staff is at the Montgomery Civic Center for a live report on a meeting of area residents who are concerned about that increase. Dennis, what's the story?
Bob, since his group met last on June 8th, 3 events have taken place that could affect property taxes across the state. First of all, a federal judge ordered the state to go ahead with collection of ad valorem taxes based on property reappraisal, despite a legislative act that would have delayed it for a year. Also, Governor Fob James signed a homestead exemption bill that would increase the state's homestead exemption on ad valorem taxes and would offer the local governments an option to do the same. And most recently, Montgomery Mayor Emery Farmer has announced a plan that, if adopted by the Montgomery City Council, would lower the city's ad valorem tax rate from 15 to 12.5 mils. With me is Richard Jordan, the chairman of the Citizens Committee for Fair and Equitable Taxation. Mr. Jordan, tell me, how will these events affect the goals and objectives of your organization that's meeting here tonight at the Civic Center?
Well, first of all, Dennis, the refusal of the federal court to grant a delay is of a temporary nature. It's disappointing to us, but it will not impede our reform of the present property tax. Secondly, we think that the governor signing into law a double homestead exemption for state and county purposes is a step in the right direction. However, to be meaningful to the taxpayers, we need a homestead exemption by the city. Thirdly, Mayor Farmer's recommendation to reduce the millage to the city council, of course, is welcome. We appreciate him taking the initiative. However, we feel like that we should also have a homestead exemption. That's where we're really hurting as far as the homeowners. Admittedly, the reduction will help everybody as well. We simply feel like that with the windfall revenue that they're going to receive, that the city ought to be able to afford both a homestead exemption and a reduction in the mills.
Thank you, sir. Bob, the interesting thing about tonight's meeting is that the candidates for the legislative districts representing Montgomery have been invited to the meeting, not to talk, but to listen. And we'll tell you what they were told on the 10 o'clock report tonight. Dennis Latham, live from the Montgomery Civic Center, WSFA TV News.
Thanks, Dennis Latham. The state of Alabama has mailed a check for $1 million to the federal...
WQB 219 to Unit 4, Tom Davis.
retirement fund that will go to provide was modified, we would have the money to be well on the way toward kindergarten. We know that we can have reform in the retirement system. It doesn't change anybody that's already in it. Has some changes for new employees, but still a good system. And we know the education fund alone will pick up $20 million minimum from here on out. Now, why should that money not go to the fundamental base of education, and that's kindergarten? Why not? Is there a better example that we're not using our money wisely?
You get into a very entangled
With your keen interest in the higher
political advice. We know we need kindergarten. I got our #1 school mom back there, isn't that right? We need kindergartens. We got about 1/3 of the youngsters in kindergartens. In the retirement fund that will go to provide was modified. We know that we can have reform in the retirement system. It doesn't change anybody that's already in it. Has some changes for new employees, but still a good system. And we know the education fund alone will pick up $20 million minimum from here on out. Now, why should that money not go to the fundamental base of education, and that's kindergarten? Why not? Is there a better example that we're not using our money wisely?
You get into a very entangled
with your keen interest in the higher
Political advice. We know we need kindergarten. I got our #1 school mom.
The dilemma for the council was whether to send the mayor's proposal to a council committee or let the entire council consider it from the outset. The argument over which way to go started when Council Chairman Willie Peake tried to assign the matter to the Council Finance Committee, and the head of the committee said no.
But I would respectfully ask that this not be assigned to the Finance Committee. I think the council members themselves need to get the information, and we're going to have to end up having a public hearing before the whole council anyway.
District 7 Councilwoman Elise Reynolds says in this case a committee hearing is an unnecessary step, and she asked the council as a whole to consider the matter. That prompted Councilman Joe Reed to say the committee considers many weighty money matters, like the yearly city budget, and since those considerations involve more money than the mayor's proposed tax break, why should it get special treatment? Councilman Luther Oliver responded by calling meetings of the Finance Committee mini news conferences where nothing is really accomplished. He said, why dilly around with the committee? At that point, Councilman Donald Watkins jumped into the fray, saying even though the mayor's proposal might be of significant political importance, he saw no reason for the council to deviate from the standard practice of referring such matters to a committee. Mayor Fulmer stayed out of the debate for the most part, only stepping in long enough to say he'd like quick council action on the proposal because his office is working on next year's city budget and needs to know what to expect. The council finally voted to bypass the Finance Committee after all and hold a public hearing on the proposed tax cut next week with a council vote in 2 weeks. By the end of the meeting, the council had 2 other items for consideration next week. One, a proposal by Councilman Watkins to abolish all council committees, and the other, a proposal by Councilman Reed to take the money Mayor Fulmer wants to give as a tax break and instead give it to public schools. Reed says the mayor has already indicated the city doesn't need the money anyway. Tom Foreman, WSFA TV News. The mayor's proposal came before the council for the first time, and like all new business, it needed a unanimous vote by the council for consideration. The unanimous vote wasn't there, and the proposal was automatically carried over to next week. But that's when the debate started. Council Chairman Willie Peake tried to give the proposal to the Finance Committee for consideration and a recommendation, and the head of the committee gave it right back. Councilwoman Elise Reynolds asked that the committee not be asked to consider the measure. She said the proposal is important enough that it will surely be considered in a public hearing before the whole council, and committee consideration would be an unnecessary step. She was countered by Councilman Joe Reed and Donald Watkins. Mr. Reed said the Finance Committee decides matters dealing with more money than the mayor's proposal, so why not it?
Mr. Watkins said if the council is going to have a committee system, it should be utilized. Councilman Luther Oliver argued against committee consideration, indicating it would be just a waste of time. When it came for a vote, the council passed up the committee and set a public hearing on the proposal for next week, with a vote on the proposal in 2 weeks. Tom Foreman, WSFA TV News.
I knew I'd get to work at it.
Representatives of the state's 14 senior institutions were asked by the Justice Department to come to the meeting. It's being held at the governor's mansion since he has been closely involved in the attempt to resolve the charge that the state's universities are segregated. The university officials met with 3 attorneys from the Justice Department's General Litigation Division who arrived this morning. This morning's discussion centered on 3 specific areas. 1, student enrollment, or the makeup of students and how they're drawn to the universities. 2, faculty and staff hiring. And 3, governance, both the possible strengthening of a central agency to oversee the universities and the makeup of the individual universities' boards of trustees. A June 30th letter from the Justice Department indicated these issues appeared close to agreement.
What we did was take the document that we had worked long and hard to prepare in December and agreed that we would proceed with that same document, that the document was basically an acceptable document, but it needed to have more specifics in it, and we set up a process to proceed to get those specifics.
I think there's a general sense of optimism in the group. You know, not mentioning any specific thing. I think everybody is, you might say, dedicated to come to some solutions on these problems. Yeah.
When you know that ultimately, if you can't reach agreement, a federal judge will be forced to reach agreement for you, it tends to encourage you to iron out your differences, and I sense that is helping us to reach agreement.
But the Justice Department says there are other stickier issues still to be addressed. They include the allegedly duplicative university programs offered in Montgomery and Huntsville and the allocation of resources to land grant programs throughout the state. Those issues will be addressed in individual meetings between the Justice Department and the universities involved. Officials say that the Justice Department wants the university presidents closely involved in drafting these solutions sometime this summer in order to avoid having a federal court take charge. Chris Grimshaw, WSFA TV News at the Governor's Mansion.
And there will be some problems. It's nice of all of these people who work with the college to show up here. I haven't had champions, organizations, corporations, big gift fund of things that were decided way back then are now being implemented. There have been some things added to it and expanded, and so it and the advancements that have been made. So it is mold the institution as a unit with the outlying campuses here in Montgomery, so that the school may serve as wide a community as possible.
Certainly it's a joy to be a part of this transition, and I'm happy that I can work with them.
2 years. And some of the things that were decided. It's nice of all of these people who work with the college to show up here. I haven't had a chance and are now being implemented. There have been some things added to it and expanded, and so it is really a larger program than was originally. Contacting foundations, organizations, corporations. As a senior college, the school would be eligible to complete the work of accreditation with the Southern Association of Colleges and Schools. Second goal will be to complete the organization of the college as a senior institution. There are some offices that are yet to be filled.
Kind of a liaison capacity between the school and churches, and
he may be spending a lot of time on the telephone with me.
Certainly it's a joy to be a part of this transition, and I'm happy that I can work with Dr. Clevenger some in helping.
Well, I feel like that the man had gone about as far as he could go. He wasn't used to living in an environment such as big cities and so forth. He used to live in the country. He was a country boy. He just about run all his territory out. He didn't have anywhere else to go.
How was his condition when you found him?
His physical condition was fair, I'd say. Of course, he was bruised and scratched up, but he was in fair physical condition.
For the second day in a row, a plan was drawn up between Smith's family and Chilton County Sheriff James Johnson for the fugitive to surrender. Yesterday's meeting between Smith and Johnson failed when Smith was apparently scared off by workmen in the woods. After yesterday's search failed to turn up Smith, lawmen were called off today to give Smith one last chance to surrender peacefully. It's believed Sheriff Johnson has spent the better part of this afternoon and evening in the wooded area where the search was centered yesterday. So far, there has been no word from Sheriff Johnson this evening, that according to Sheriff Department employees. If Smith does not surrender tonight, law enforcement officials say they will pull out all the stops and resume the massive manhunt tomorrow. In Clanton, Don Phelps, WSFA TV News.
1 OCR and 2 barcode readers. What are you doing to help us? Sears Roebuck was trying to tell us in all their complaints that somebody was stealing all their CODs in Brea Branch, Kentucky. I think JD's got more problems than he knows he's got. Because if you don't have a straighten out, and I guess she's still there, isn't she, JD? She still probably mixed things up. But make a suggestion. Maybe you want to run a post office down the road.
Transferred to the Air National Guard. I remember now.
The athletic committee chairman and everything. So we'll get to that point. Okay, first of all, the legacy presentation.
Today?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I think that's what yeah, we might not make it that way.
About half of those attending this partisan political rally last week in Birmingham got there in vans owned by Jefferson County or some nearby municipality. All vehicles had county tags. The director of the Jefferson County Office of Senior Citizen Activity, Barbara Bonfield, says she allowed the vans to be used because she was asked.
Jefferson County Commissioner Ben Erdrich, who's in charge of public welfare, told us he's ordered a review of state, federal, and local guidelines to determine if the use of the vans is permissible. He says if it's not, they'll stop using them to transport senior citizens to partisan political rallies. Dennis Latham, WSFA TV News.
I know after you had met John Wayne, there was a lot of talk if there was a movie that John Wayne would do the part. Obviously, since he's died, that's changed. But are you happy with the two that were mentioned, George Scott and Burt Lancaster?
Well, yeah, I think they're great actors, but it'll take a great actor to do me. I have confidence in these people. I'm really impressed with them.
Coach, what would you hope if the movie is made? What would you hope that maybe down the line would be said about it?
Well, I hope it would maybe help some youngsters be a better person. I'm not trying to, that's what I hope, and that's what I hope they'll come out with.
Now, in 1984, summer of 1984, I will be 25 years old. Yeah. And it hadn't crossed my mind yet. And it may be in the back of my mind, in the back of my mind saying, well, don't give it up yet. You don't give up hope. Maybe in a year or two you can come back. It's back there in the back, and it hadn't really come out yet. And I don't know if it will. Maybe I have to wait, see. Maybe when my world records fall, maybe that'll be some sort of motivation. As of now, though.
But you haven't closed the door.
I haven't closed the door, but it's slowly shutting.
Well, I feel it was up and down, and a lot of people around the league say that I should have a lot of things to be proud of, but me myself, I was not personally satisfied. But there were some things that some bright spots that such as chosen the most popular King player, and I was up for Rookie of the Month in February and different things. So I've really shown that I could play within the league, but it's something that you have to keep working with and keep trying to improve yourself and deal with all the situations involved. And I feel very good about the situation, feel very good about the Kings organization, but this year was a learning experience throughout for not only myself but the Kings organization because of the young talent that we had.
Send these letters if you're going to send them at all in the company of a resume if you're going to bother to send one of these things.
Because nowadays folks are talking about resumes. I can find it probably on another page I don't have. But somewhere in here, bombers and engravers and all that good stuff, you'll see that on the list somewhere. And I'm finding what you're interested in is not on here, and you want to know more about it if you have them. And it would be nice if you had them. Again, I'm not going to hold you up so you don't have one. You should have done your homework and all that. But I do want you to have one. It's